Welcome back to my garage. We are doing an upper day today. I have a top set of bench. I am still currently in a strength block using the JuggernautAI app. New Juggernaut gear. I'll show you some of the cute shirts that we have, and you can get that at shop.jtsstrength.com. So as I'm getting ready to warm up from bench, I am gonna warm up with the bar, but the first thing that I like to do is, just because it is a heavier day and it's kind of cold outside, I do some band pull apart. So I get the lighter band here. I'm just gonna grab it here on the end and just pulling it apart, kind of warm up the shoulders, especially because I tend to get really high up onto my traps. And I usually just do like 1 set of 10. Your warm-ups before you start benching don't have to be extensive. It shouldn't take 40 minutes to warm up. You can also do this in between warming up with the bar and then coming in between and doing some band pull aparts. Other thing I like to do is cat-cows. And again, that's because I do get into a higher arched position and it kind of just warms everything up, gets everything moving. Because the last thing you want on a bench is to feel stiff. So as you're warming up for bench, main thing that you want to think about as you're doing this is you want to make your warm-up sets look the same way as your top sets. I know I've talked about this before, but it bears repeating just because I think a lot of us can get sloppy on these warm-up sets. Competition bench, I used to be wider grip. I've brought it in a little bit just because it feels better. I like to then roll up onto my traps as high as possible. The cue I like to use here is chest to chin. My eyes are directly right underneath the bar. And as I unrack, then I bring my butt down, feet flat, and my eyes, I'm watching the bar as it touches my chest. It's weird because I have heard people say that they look at the ceiling, but I do believe looking at the bar is gonna make it easier for you to have a better bar path because you're watching your touch point. When I competed in the USAPL, actually even the IPF, you used to be able to put your feet on the bench. IPF changed the rules so you can't have your feet on the bench, which I really liked because it actually allowed me to get really high up onto my traps. With the new rule, you can't do that. On the off chance I ever want to come back, the way that I changed my setup, I sit down where my feet need to go. I get up onto my toes because that's just how I set up so I can get high onto my traps. I get underneath the bar and then use my toes to get onto my traps and then set down. I'm still able to achieve the position that I achieved before, albeit I do think I was still able to get higher onto my traps when I was able to put my feet on there and use that bridge position. So if you compete in a federation that allows you to do that, I still recommend putting your feet on the bench. You're just gonna be able to get into better positioning that way, especially if you're short and you really can't reach the floor that well. The reason that I like my feet on the floor and I don't like to use blocks is because a lot of times when you use blocks and it elevates that knee, it brings you even to the hip joint, and it actually can make your butt leave the bench a lot sooner because you're not able to like root into the floor. By having your feet on the floor, what you want to achieve is that knee being below that hip joint, and it's gonna actually put you in like a better position to get tight. And you'll see as I set up and take this off, the butt doesn't come up, versus if I had the blocks coming up like that and getting down, I really actually wouldn't be able to achieve that same high arch position. I actually benched in blocks at one meet. I had hurt my back, so I actually couldn't put my feet on the floor without my back hurting. You know, you do what you had to do. We did the workaround, and at the meet, the blocks weren't taped and my feet slid. They allowed me to retake the lift, and it was actually for an American record at the time. I was like, screw it. I can't get into good positioning. I can't feel tight. I feel like my butt's coming off. So I went without blocks and I got the lift. If your back is hurting, obviously do what you have to do, but I do feel like you're able to actually root and feel your feet more when you're actually able to touch the floor. Also, it's just an extra variable in competition. I like to remove every variable and be in complete control. Made a jump from 80 kilos to 87.5, which is a 7.5 kilo jump. For a lot of lifters, especially female lifters, that might be too big of a jump. Just make sure as you're warming up, you're taking note of what feels good, what feels heavy, what feels light. Typically for most female lifters, 2.5 kilo jumps tends to feel better as they're working up. 7.5 kilos might staple you and feel extremely heavy when you unrack. So just be mindful of your warm-ups. And like I said, make notes. This way, as you start training, you can either make adjustments if you need to make adjustments, or you're gonna know what works for you. So that was my top set. It felt really easy. I only had to do it for 3 reps. I'm gonna rate that a 7 RPE, meaning I could have done 3 more reps. If you're using the app, you'll see I rate that a 7. I hit done, and then that's gonna populate my back down sets. I'm gonna show you really quick. If I were to rate that, let's just say a 9, like I could have only done 1 more rep, it would drop that down to 80 kilos for my back down sets. Be honest with those ratings. This way, when you do your back down sets, you're gonna get good quality sets in there, and it's not gonna be such a struggle that you start to feel, defeated. Last set. Okay, so rest periods for bench. I tend to move pretty quickly just because I feel like I recover really quickly. As you're working up to your top set, as it gets heavier, you can take a little bit longer rest in between those sets. But like for my back down sets, I'll probably take like a minute and a half max. If you start taking, 10, 15 minutes between sets, it's probably gonna cool down a little bit, and it's just not necessary. If your workouts are taking 3 hours plus, that could be why. Of course, on heavier squats, heavier deadlifts, extend that rest time so that you feel recovered enough to do the next set effectively. But just be mindful of what those are so that you're not taking too long or too short of a time, especially like in competition. Typically max between sets, depending on where you're at in line. You're not gonna be sitting around for 30 minutes. If there's 12 people in a flight, in your first, you have like a 12-minute break, which, can be kind of excessive especially for us smaller lifters, but just be mindful of those rest periods.